So as we said, this is unlike TED Talks. You get to ask Ray questions. And since it's a small room, I don't think you need a mic. Please go ahead. Yes, Ron.
Thank you very much for the presentation. So I read a book many years ago by Jack Welch. The title was Winning. In the appendix, somebody asked him, how do you create a good company culture? And he said it starts from the top down, and what the CEO instills is a belief in saying what you mean and doing what you say. I found that very insightful. My question to you as a CEO is, do you agree with that as a good way to instill a good company culture? And is there anything you would add to that about how a CEO or the upper executives of a company can take actions to instill a good company culture? So what he said was, say what you mean, do what you say.
Yeah, so I think Jack Welch obviously was a very, very successful, very capable corporate CEO. He was probably a failure at life. He did things that cause tremendous trauma and hardship for people, for families. He was also probably one of the greatest CEOs in terms of building shareholder value. So you have this very, very funny situation with Jack Welch. He set up a lot of, I used to study Jack Welch. I worshiped him like everybody else when I was 10 years into my career. His, weed out the bottom 20% kind of thing and keep improving your organization. But as I got to know the people in GE, and I got to know the business well, and as I study other businesses over my career, what I would say is anytime you have a situation where you have a CEO who's a rock star, who likes to draw attention to himself, you're in trouble. And it's pretty much ended that way everywhere that I'm aware of, where you had a personality like a Jack Welch. The responsibility to be accountable, there's no question about that. Accountability is critical to success. It's critical to delivering on performance. But I knew most of those people around Jack Welch at that time. Dave Calhoun was a good personal friend of mine. He ran a transportation business. All those guys ended up running other corporations. Some successfully, like Dave Calhoun. Some very unsuccessfully, like Bob Nardelli. So you have this funny dichotomy with Jack Welch. I mean, that could be a topic, just one topic for a case study one night. I respect what he accomplished in many ways as a corporation. Westinghouse was in a race with GE. The reason Westinghouse got into the problems that they did is because you had a situation where the people in Westinghouse were racing to try to copy, be better, be bigger than GE, put the credit corp in place. GE's financial services group was so successful, even though Gary Wendt couldn't stand Jack Welch and vice versa. I knew both of them. And then on the credit corp side, you had these guys in Westinghouse who were incredible engineers that went out and speculated on real estate just to short-term financially keep up with GE, and the company imploded. And 30 years later, so did GE. Was it because of Welch that the long-term health care happened? No, he wasn't there. Was the culture he put in place what caused that? I would argue yes. The revenue recognition policies, the aggressive operational approaches they've taken within their business across the board built an environment to propagate, in my opinion, irresponsible management. So it may sound a little bit harsh, but I think that his premise that you stated, I would ascribe to, but his overall leadership, I think, was not, in the end of the day, the best long-term thing for GE. Yes?
Yeah. Ray, you had an incredible career. And my kudos to you
The Fortune 5, let me just say, the Fortune 500 company in being here is a result of 27,000 people. Let me just say, Bill Castling had the courage to take that company and to do a management buyout. He convinced 50 people around him to support that. That company was put on stock exchange in 1999. He had the courage and the vision to buy Rockwell Collins when they were getting out of positive train control business and continued to invest in that business for 10 years without any idea where it was going to generate revenue. And then he hired El Newpaver, who hired me. We put a strategy in place that everybody got behind to be here. So it was a lot of people over a long period of time trying to accomplish that goal. So we're very fortunate to be in the situation we're in. And you got a guy down here who's running a $1.5 billion portion of that business, and a guy here running probably the most strategic, important part of that business, $500 million. So $2 billion of that business is represented by those two guys.
Great reflection. Give credit to lots of other people. It's a sign of a great leader. So anyways, I came to this country in the 70s.
Yes.
And Pittsburgh in 76 or so. At that time, Pittsburgh used to have 50 Fortune 500 companies. And they kept dissipating one after another. But it's really a great thing to finally have new Fortune 500 companies coming to Pittsburgh. Now, you build a great company. And building a company is not a smooth road. It's not like a hockey stick. There are lots of ups and downs and challenges. It could be good to hear some of your key challenges which you face and how did you overcome those challenges?
Yeah, so I talked about 7, 8 challenges in my career, in my talk. I can pick one. When I was asked to go to London Underground, it was a 3-year assignment. $7.5 billion business. So I built a team from scratch. There's a whole history why there wasn't anyone in place. It was when Bombardier and Atrans were coming together. And we both bid on that job. We had a Chinese wall up. And the Bombardier guys were convinced they were going to win. Guess what? They lost. Atrans bid won. It was good because they acquired Atrans. But guess what? They didn't have any resource in place to do the job. So they asked me if I would go, and I did. And we started the business. We built the team. We delivered on the responsibilities and the milestones associated with the project. And everything was going really well. And Johnine can tell you the first year I worked pretty much every day throughout the year. And by the third year, second year, things were pretty much in place, going routinely. And by the third year, we were going to travel a little bit. Figured we could take advantage of being in London. Our boys were all in college. But the guy that used to have the meeting that I talked about came to me and said, hey, your old business, that was the best performing business in the Bombardier group in the past, it's $650 million at risk. In 2 years, it went from a 20% EBIT business to $650 million at risk. Would you go back and fix it? I told them 3 conditions. They had moved the headquarters from Pittsburgh to Kingston. A lot of these guys lived through this story. I said 3 conditions. You let me move the headquarters back where the critical mass is. You let me hire my own team. Stay the hell away from me. I went back, and that year I did. There were 2 years in my life I worked every day except Christmas. That was one of the years. And the guys that were on my leadership team are sitting here. I fired 22 people. I put 12 people in place I could trust. We put our heads down. And by the end of that year, we wrote off 127 of that 650. And the next year, we broke even. We bared our backlog from 250 million to 5 billion by the third year. And we were making 15% again. And these guys are the ones that accomplished that. Matt ran my manufacturing organization. Mike ran the program management organization. Lance, the engineering organization. These folks are the ones who did that. So there were many, many experiences I had with that type of challenge. You know, if I go back all the way to the New York City days, the guy at the top at the auditorium up there, you wouldn't believe this today, but he and I used to literally, at 2 in the morning, low crawl under barbed wire fence to get into New York City transit barns to inspect and maintenance our equipment before it went out on the road at 5 in the morning. You definitely would not make it under that fence today. So I think there's a lot of history, a lot of accomplishments, but at the end of the day, my most important focus, as I said, was on the people in our business. Because I knew that's where the capability was, that's where the expertise was, that's where the heart was, and that's where the camaraderie was in every business I was in. We had teams in Taiwan, in Korea, in Malaysia, and again, if you went to those teams, you knew those teams behaved differently than the other organizations in our corporation because of the value system we put in place. Paul Overby, where'd he go? He leave? So Paul and I were like soulmates. We worked together 30 years, always trying to focus on culture, always trying to focus on value, always trying to values, always trying to do what was right by people. Great.
What do you plan to do after retirement?
Yeah, so I'm not planning on going back to work. So the rumors about me coming back to Bombardier aren't true. I did try to buy the business over 6 times, and the corporation always told me the same thing, that they didn't want to sell it, that they felt it was strategic. And my response was, well, why would you ruin the business then? You're allowing it to deteriorate. We had an 80% market share worldwide when I was there. So what I plan to do is focus a lot on Mr. TiE over there and my other 9 grandchildren, on Tim and Michael and Matt, my sons, and most of all, the one who's been neglected the most, my wife. I have a lot of other things. I'm on 2 public boards. I'm on a host of other nonprofits and philanthropic boards. I do a lot of work with Carnegie Mellon at the Federal Transportation Center and Mobility 21, Traffic 21, things like that. So the reality is I have to decide what I'm not going to do, you know, because I will just tell you folks this, that there was a comment made before. You know, I have another philosophy in life, maybe associated a little bit with my background. When people ask me to do things, I always challenge myself to not say no, to say yes. And the reason is very simple. The easiest answer in the world you can give is no. And if everyone gives that answer, there's no one to do anything. And there's so much need in this world. Still today, in this great economy, there's so much need in this world. You know, it's like when the guy behind you, Satya, was walking through the airport coming from India one day, and I was coming home from London, and he's looking around the airport trying to figure out where he's going to go. And I said, I walked up to him, I said, can I help you? He said, I'm trying to go to Cincinnati, just coming back from. India, and I can't find my gate. And I said, what gate is it? E-gate. That's when e-gates were still open. And I said, come on, I'm going that way, you come with me. So I took him down on the people mover, and we were talking the little bit of time we had. He said, what do you do? I said, I do what you're riding on. Here's my card. When we stop this train, you run up those escalators as fast as you can, try to catch your plane. He missed his plane. But we've had a relationship for 15 years as a result of that. And now with his wife and his children. 17? So I didn't have to stop. I didn't have to help him. I didn't have to have a follow-up. But at the end of the day, you know, it comes back to the golden rule, right? So if you have the capacity and capability to do things for others, do things in a community, you have a responsibility to do it. You don't have to do it 24 hours a day, but you should take the opportunity to try to find a way to give back. Okay. Take care. Thank you.
We'll be in
Thank you
touch.
very much. Okay.
Love it. I will enjoy it.
Thank you.
I'm kind of curious, how have you balanced accountability, people taking ownership with clients and serving others?
So that's a fantastic, that is really a great question. Because if there's one thing in my career that I have constantly heard from my bosses, it's this: you're too nice a guy. You're too nice a guy. It's much harder to be nice and be effective than it is to be a jerk and not be. Or to be a jerk like Jack Welch and be. It's much harder to do what's right by people and to hold them accountable, because that's in their best interest, not just in the short term, in the long term. You can ask the people in this room. It was not easy to work in our businesses. Ask Matt how much slack I gave him on his manufacturing requirements, or Mike on his project requirements, his collections. Ask him how much slack he got on his locomotive projects with motive power. It's much harder to do things. It takes time. Now, I will get up at 5 in the morning answering emails from people in Europe, and I will go to sleep at 11 o'clock answering the Far East ones. I had a guy working for me directly who ran his own corporation and who I worked with in Bombardier. And we had a conflict, a disagreement one day. And it was over this, something very simple, value-oriented. I said to him, let's come to an agreement on the principles of communication. Fine. Here's my approach, he said. You should not talk to anyone more than 2 levels down in the organization. I said, that's interesting. Why? He said, because you only have so much time available to you. You're running a multi-billion-dollar corporation, and you need to prioritize and focus your attention. And my response to him was pretty simple, and that is, you're out of your freaking mind. That is never going to happen. I have a responsibility to every individual in this corporation, and I'm going to communicate with all of them as I have the opportunity, and certainly any of them that reach out to me for help. I could have taken his approach. I'd have had a hell of a lot more time available. It's much harder to be a good person. I'm not saying I'm a good person. All I'm saying is that I tried my best to balance values, consideration, treating people the way I'd want to be treated, and delivering on our business success. I'm the only executive from that Westinghouse day through AG, through ABB, through Bombardier, now to Wabtec. In that 30-year period, through 5 ownership changes, I'm the only executive that's survived each of those changes. So they didn't keep me because I was a nice or not a nice guy. They kept me because our business performed. And I tried to set an example for the rest of the leadership team and the management team that I wanted them to ascribe to. Greg. Yeah, so you heard everything I did, right? But you didn't hear this. I coached midget football for 10 years. I started from scratch and coached 12 years a midget wrestling program until my kids got into high school. I'd go up and wrestle with them on the weekends. I taught Sunday school for 15 years, and on and on and on. So it comes back a little bit to the comment I made about, when you have an opportunity to say yes, say yes. So you have to prioritize, obviously, and I did. Instead of watching TV or playing golf, no insults to the golfers, okay? Or going out, drinking, playing pool. I devoted my time to those 2 things. I devoted it to my family, my church, and my work. So if I wasn't working, those were the 2 areas. In both of those areas, my family was involved with. Matt, the youngest, got married first, and at his bachelor, at the not bachelor party, at the rehearsal dinner, he got up and he made probably one of the kindest compliments I've ever been given in my life. And he said, "Dad, I just want to thank you because there's not one important moment in my life that you weren't there." That's why I was working at 38 as a president and CEO of the company. You finished with that beer?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
First of all, you are my inspiration, and this one question is, it's amazing the sort of energy you have, your willingness to help people, your willingness to give opportunities, and your willingness to pull the downtrodden. What inspired you, or how are you like the way you are today? I have not come across anyone like you. Like I said, you are an inspiration to me. I don't know what the future holds to me, but I'll certainly say one thing, that I want to be like you. I want to be the kind of person that you are and have that power and ability to help people, give that opportunity. So who was your Ray Betler is my question.
So the next time you get me a beer, and both of us will have a beer. I think a lot of my inspiration came from my mother. I watched the sacrifice that she made during our life, and I'll tell you a story, but it's difficult. So, my mother was the healthiest person in the world. She was less than 5 feet tall, 100 pounds soaking wet. And she was always on the move. If she wasn't working at home, in that little 4-room house, she was out helping neighbors, doing other things. She would exercise 3 times a day. She'd take a neighbor lady walk 7 miles around the parking lot of the church parking lot near our house. And, she was always on the go. When Johnine and I started dating at 13, her parents were like my parents and vice versa. Her dad and I were very close. He contracted colon cancer when he was 59, and he had it for 9 years. We did our best to support him. Her mom died at 56 years of age when we were 19. And we supported her dad through that, and a month before he died, my mom, they found a tumor here. And they didn't think they could do anything. And she was a smoker when we were young. And they radiated this tumor, it went away. We thought it was like a miracle. And then 3 months later, Johnine took her for a routine brain scan. They found a spot. 3 months later, she passed away. In between, she saw me get promoted to president CEO of our company. So she lived to watch that. And obviously you can imagine how proud she was. But I never had a problem to keep in perspective the importance of my job. Because she spent her whole life serving other people. And basically, fundamentally, that's what I wanted to do. So I think from my faith, from my upbringing, from her example. And living with Jonine's not bad either. She's pretty helpful. Hi, Jace.
First of all, congrats on the recent retirement well deserved.
Thank you.
Your 2 big events, saved by several people here, people who are followers. It really is what you do. Now, my question is hypothetical. So, what's the one job you always wanted but you never had?
So Jason is an incredible example of what this city is all about today. And he's a guy who came from Central America to Duquesne University. And Tom Murrin, who I'm convinced if he was made president CEO of Westinghouse, it would still be here today. Tom Murrin wrote me a note, like he often did, and he said, hey, he always picked the best students in his school, his master's program. He said, I have this really sharp kid. You ought to talk to him. Anything Tom Murrin suggested to me, I did. I called him, invited Jason out, and he's running a sales marketing organization today. His children over in Peters Township and his beautiful wife, and probably Shay's in charge of the house. I said it before, I think, Jason, for me, my only real goal was to be a good dad. I didn't care about anything else. I don't mean that in a cavalier way. I would have been, my whole family are carpenters. I'm the only one that went the black way, black sheep of the family. So I've been happy being a carpenter, probably not nearly as good as my brother. I'd have been happy being a janitor. We did, here's the irony of being a janitor at Consolidated Coal. So it was my mom and I, we do it as a team. And we had, in that building, here's how arrogant people can be. There was a German guy who was Dr. something, who was head of engineering. Every night before he left, which was around 5:05, he would put something, a dust, a piece of thread, somewhere in that office to see if it was there the next morning. And if it was, he called the company to basically say, my mother or I didn't do a good job. So now, Consol Energy is the same company. I worked there as a janitor. I knew a lot of people that worked in the mine, that worked in the labs, because I did everything, not just the offices. and develop really nice relationships with them. I'm now on the board of Consol Energy. The first time I sat in the Duquesne Club, in their private room, it was a very, very weird feeling. And I told their CEO, Nick DeElias, I said, you know, this is a strange thing for me. I don't know why. I said, I used to work as a janitor for this company. And now I'm sitting in the private room in the Duquesne Club. So you have no idea, you know, what's ahead. I say, if you look back, you can see the Lord's hand in it all. You know, to sit here and worry about the future and where you're headed and try to construct your career and your career path, I think that isn't time well spent. I think time well spent is to apply yourself, work hard, try to do the right things for the right reasons. You have to have fundamental capabilities to be successful. Nobody's going to hire you in a business if you can't do marketing and sales, if you can't do engineering. You know, you're not going to be working in a company to start with. But then the question is, what differentiates you once you get there? And that, for me, all comes back to the discussion about values. You going to ask me about Percy Barnevik?
About what?
Percy Barnevik?
Sorry, is it okay to ask a second question?
Yes.
So you talked a lot about getting the right team with you. So suppose your company is looking to hire an executive or even a non-executive, and they call you in to check the person out for half an hour. What are the top, most informative questions that you would ask that candidate, and what kinds of answers do you look for?
So I think in terms of trying to understand a person, trying to develop some intuition about a person, you know, I want to understand a little bit about the person, a little bit about what the person's all about. So I'd probably ask some prescriptive questions, background, things like that. But then I would want to understand a little bit more about the person as an individual, how they would address personal issues in their personal life as well as their professional life, how they would interact with other people, what kind of values do they have. Try to understand, you know, the orientation. For a long part of my career, we would put people through a program called PSP. Do you know that program? It's Gary Williamson. Sharon, you know the program, right? And so we would try to do some more qualitative and quantitative testing. But then for me to hire a person, I had a role that I had to sit with every person that was going to go into management or be promoted to management. My whole discussion would be on our core values. So I'd spend the entire time talking about the core values of the company and trying to get a feel for, was the person committed to those? Would they embrace those or would they not?
What questions would you ask?
So I would ask them questions like how they would deal with people in difficult situations, you know, in terms of work instructions, how they would apply, how they would delegate their work, how they would interact with their employees, how much did they communicate with them, what kind of leadership style did they have? Did they work from their office? Did they work from the field with the people in their organization? Those are kinds of questions. Same about customers, same about suppliers. You know, there's a lot of people that have the attitude suppliers are the enemy, customers are the enemy. So I tried to understand what their mindset was toward the different stakeholders in our company.
you're starting from scratch. So, and we all want to become like you. But when you start from scratch, you don't have all those resources. Is there any advice you can give to people who are starting their business, don't have resources, they have a great idea, and what fundamental things they should be, besides core values, their integrity, what other things they should be looking to build a team, find the resources, any advice you can give that will be helpful to entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so I started next to a creek in a 4-room house. So I think, you know, at the end of the day, you have to build the capabilities, you know, and go to people like Bill Castling and get some seed money, you know, put your ideas together in a way that are convincing to get people committed to invest. But the core to success is to find the right people to participate in the business. So if you don't have money to pay the people, then you have to be willing to offer something. Something could be equity. You know, there's a lot of different formulas that you can put together. But I think there's different keys to success. First of all, is the product or idea, the service, is it something that people ascribe to? Is it something that people believe in, get behind? And finding the right people. You know, if you're a small company or a startup, you know, you got guys like Chris here, they can talk about it. You know, you don't have many options. You can't go out and hire hundreds of people. You get one. You better pick the best one. So I think it all starts with people to believe in whatever it is that you're trying to get behind. And I think it's very, very important to hire the right, call it leader, call it a starter, but hire the right people to seed the company and to launch it.
Okay, 2 questions, final questions. Yes, please. Yeah, right here.
Thank you, Mr. Betler. I came to know you through Satya, and I placed you at the same pedestal as me. I never thought I would place anybody at the same pedestal as my father, who I lost 2 years ago, and you probably stand a little bit above that now. So my question to you is that ethical choices typically are the kind where it's not between right and wrong. It's between making a choice of 2 paths that are both correct but have pros and cons. I wanted to hear about an ethical challenge that you faced where it was really difficult to make the correct decision. And what was the driving force?
I didn't get it all, because...
Oh, I'll repeat the question. So, when it comes to ethical choices, it's not between right and wrong.
Yeah.
It's between 2 choices that are both right,
Good and
but
one
there are
better.
pros and cons to each.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask about an ethical challenge that you faced and what was the driving force behind making a decision.
Yeah, I think it's more normal. What you're talking about, Sri, you know, the world's not always black and white. It's somewhat gray in normal circumstances. And I think it's a question how you view your environment. Is a glass half full, half empty? I think there's good in everyone. I think there's good in everything. So there's always opportunities that you can derive goodness, value out of whatever it is that you pursue, the task that you pursue. I think when you have conflicts and priorities, you know, there's 2 ways to approach those. One is very quantitatively. I normally, in my career, approach them very qualitatively. So if I have 2 choices, you know, probably what I'm going to do is try to do them both first, if you ask Johnny. And if I can't, I'll prioritize one, but not totally neglect the other. So without a specific example in mind, I can't concretely answer your question, but I would try to prioritize them based on what I believed would add the most value. If it's an organizational issue, the most value to the total organization.
So She was asking about an ethical challenge. So how do you deal with an ethical challenge? Was that your question?
Yeah.
So when it involves ethics, so it's not really a priority per se.
So when it involves ethics, it is black and white for me. There's no almost wrong behavior when it comes to ethics. You know, I've seen some incredible things in my career, bad things. I had a boss once that took a female manager, to bed at an off-site meeting when she was totally intoxicated. Woke up the next morning, thought she had AIDS. She had 2 young kids. I found her in my office crying over the weekend when I happened to be in there. You know, was that her fault or was that his fault? There's no in between. You know, when it comes to ethics, and I apologize because I wasn't catching all the questions. When it comes to ethics, there's no in between for me. There's no gray area. It's either right or it's not right. You treat people the way you want to be treated. That's as good a role as any role you're going to ever come across.
Okay, one final question.
Ray, it's really nice to hear you. I've heard a little bit from Rajendra about you. Your talk really came hard. Certainly resonated with me. The question I have is, in today's age of competitiveness, one of the things you mentioned, I couldn't relate to that because you said when you get an opportunity, grab it, do it, with the utmost sincerity. But in today's culture, it's more about tooting your own horn, ensuring that you're in the forefront. That's the kind of culture you see around you. So knowing that you have all kinds of people vying for that opportunity or vying for that, being in the limelight, should you just put your head down and keep working at it and hope for the next best thing to happen? Because certainly you do get tapped for opportunities, but not every time. Because there are a lot of other people also trying to compete for the same position or, to make progress in the company.
Mm-hmm. So, my response will be you control the things you have control over. I don't have control over the other people in the room. I have control over me. And I'm not going to covet to have animosity toward other people if they're successful. My goal would be everyone is successful in an organization, in a team, in this room. So if I can achieve something because of my performance, and that's something that basically I achieved legitimately and am recognized for it, that's wonderful. If someone else does it better, even better. So I don't spend a lot of time worrying about other people around me in terms of what they have and what I don't. I know for a fact that through my entire career, I've probably been underpaid. I make more money than I ever expected, but I've always been the youngest person in my jobs. I know from simple benchmarking, it's not something that I'm concerned about. My concern is to derive gratification from accomplishing things. And cashing a check, criticizing someone who achieved success when I didn't, those aren't things I think we should waste our time on. Control the things you can control, do the best job you can, and try to be appreciative and content with that. If there's opportunities to do better, lessons learned, we all try to get better every day at what we do it. That's important. But don't be jealous of the person next to you if they're able to succeed in your definition and you're not. There's no benefit in that.
I distinctly remember the first time I met Ray. He said, none of the things that I've achieved I aspired for. And here is a testament of success. And I want to thank Ray for giving of his time,
Thanks,
his
Krishna.
heart,
Thank you.
and for the whole